Does everybody hear that, or is that me or Debbie? Just me and Debbie?
No, we hear it.
Oh, everybody gets to hear it. So I can't just sneak a recording in now, because whoever else on the other end is going to know. Oh shucks.
Leanne reminded us last night, because we really nearly forgot to record last night, didn't we? So
yes, I'm getting good at that, forgetting it.
Oh, that's not like you, Heather.
I have my bit of paper that says stop recording. I have to keep it out now to remind me to record.
Right, who have we got? Right, so we've got a few people missing, but okay. How is everybody after last night? Did you enjoy your session with Andrew?
Yeah, good.
Yeah. Anything that you would like to talk about in relation to that, and mention or ask about? No.
They hated him, really. They thought, man, who is this guy coming in strutting the stuff as though he owns the place? Good grief.
Ah. It must have been quite good, actually, to hear Andrew just in general conversation using a lot of the things that we've talked about. Just actually using those in practice. In fact, we're going to talk a little bit more about that today as well, and I'm going to get you to be identifying that a little bit more as well, just looking at how he's using what he refers to as Andrewisms. We heard
I think it was Vanessa and her crew.
Was it?
It was Vanessa's group right at the beginning, who suddenly sat down, and when he was doing all the demos and stuff, they started writing down the words he used. And then towards the end, they compiled them all and made the list up. So this goes back to 2013, 14.
Yeah,
it was his students on the course that actually wrote down all the Andrewisms.
Yes.
They got so used to hearing them all.
I think you'll notice as well when you talk about them later, because we're going to have a bit of a discussion about that, or you're going to have a bit of a discussion about that, is just how much you're using them already a lot of the time. There's so much being incorporated already into what you're doing. So hopefully you'll pick up on that when you're looking through that. Have any of you had a chance to look through the list in that module?
Yeah.
Yeah, some of you
You're going to need the list tonight.
Yeah, you're going to need the list tonight. So make sure you've got that list in front of you. What page is it, Heather?
23 onwards, I think.
23 onwards. You're going to need that list, because you're going to be working your way through it in discussion. Now, are we going to do that in threes, Heather, or bigger groups? What do you think?
Yeah.
Threes would be fine.
Just the usual breakout room numbers.
Okay. Thank you, Becky. Right. Okay. Well, before we kick off tonight, anybody got any questions about anything going forward? Anything they want to share that's happened? Well, since yesterday, really, or during the week? Anything that anybody wants to share?
Did anyone have any interesting dreams with what got maybe triggered?
No.
No.
No. Okay.
Am I the only one who was up at 3 o'clock in the morning processing all the stuff he was saying yesterday? Jeez.
No, you can share.
I'm knackered.
You can share, Heather. What did you dream about then?
No, I wasn't dreaming. I woke up and I ended up having mini ab reactions in the early hours of the morning, just crying and shaking and thinking, shit, what the hell is this all about?
Oh dear.
So
that's not good news.
Yeah.
So obviously something Andrew said has triggered something in you.
Yeah, well, you see, there's you got 4 years experience, Fiona's got 6 years experience, Andrew's got 30 plus years, and I'm feeling like the little newbie, and what the hell do I know?
Oh, that's not good at all. Well, actually, if I'm honest, today I've been having probably because of other things going on in my life as well, but I've had a day where I've been feeling quite chest as well. So I think we all suffer from imposter syndrome, I guess, isn't it? Would you agree that most of you suffer from that in some area in your life?
Definitely, but I felt that it was, whatever, I think it was Sarah who had mentioned it, and then that's how I've been feeling as well. And I think it's a about, you know, having the fear to do the, you know, the regressions and things. And, you know, one day thinking, what am I doing? And I shouldn't be doing this. I should focus on something else. But it was just nice to know that, you know, when he said, look, I am throwing you in the deep end here, because I was kind of thinking, you know, I must be really thick, or not thick, but, you know, I must be really stupid, like not being able to, you know, do this properly. But, you know, when he said, look, you know, most people have scripts and things to do this. So it made me feel better, but it made me feel a bit better this morning.
That's good. That's really good. And I think something I'm sure Andrew will be openly admit, and certainly he openly admits to me sometimes when I'm having a little bit of a moment, that, you know, he has bad days. We all have bad days, you know, and he invented it all. You know, I sometimes feel a bit like Heather, and I think, well, this is Andrew's stuff. I've got to get it right. I've got to make sure it sounds like it's Andrew's thing, you know, because obviously I've found my way of doing some things in the same way as perhaps Fiona has. So my job is to deliver it as Andrew has put it together. So sometimes I worry that I'm not doing that enough, you know, so it's, so I've got Heather here. Well, I know who will.
Yeah, Heather here hasn't managed to go out all by herself and get her own way of doing it. So Heather is as close to Andrew as you get.
So, but we all do. And as I said, it's like I've said many times, that Andrew doesn't, you know, he isn't trying to reproduce little Andrews to go out there. That's not what this is all about. He's sharing his knowledge and his experience so that we can put together what we put together, and we take that. And obviously, you know, we do want to use what he's giving us, but you will find your own way of using these things once you get out there and you're building your own clientele. But we do all suffer from imposter syndrome, I can assure you. And I'm sure Andrew sometimes he thinks, oh, well, I've said this works, you know, but there must have been a point for him where he's actually been very nervous about that himself. You know,
well, it's taken him 30 years to get to where he has got to. So you're getting actually 30 years experience in one package.
Absolutely.
Whereas it's only been in the last few years that he's developed the core beliefs, which, because I came in last year and that was part of the package, I just thought he must have been working on this he must have known this for years. In fact, he's only kind of done it in the last few years, put the core beliefs together.
That wasn't there when I did the course.
That wasn't there when you did it.
No, and there's quite a few things that have been added in. So constantly he's evolving and he's developing. Yes, it can, Claire. I just seen that, yes. Because it's indicative of so many other things. But yes, I mean, he's evolving all the time. And you will see sometimes a session with Andrew where it isn't quite going where he wants to, because that does happen. You know, we're all going to have sessions like that. And it's not just because of us. It might be we're having a bad day. It might be because of who's on the other end, you know, but it's, but we all have a little bit of that. But strangely, I've had a day, not quite like you, Heather. I wasn't waking up shaking, but I definitely this morning was feeling a little bit like that. So, you know, I think we all do. We all have our stuff, don't we? So don't worry about that. Anything else that anybody wants to mention about what they got from yesterday, listening to Andrew speaking? Did it clarify some of the things that we're doing with you?
It was really, really helpful to see him do the clean questioning.
Yes.
With Rachel, who, forgive me, Rachel, was resistant.
Yes.
It's just absolutely brilliant the way that he stuck with it, firm, but still really friendly.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, that was so good to watch and learn from.
And you probably guarantee as well, while Andrew was doing that, you know, and you know, Rachel, we're not picking on you for being resistant. We know it's not deliberate, but that must have been quite nerve-wracking for him too, because he's the guru here. He's the person who's invented these techniques. He's the person who's put it all together, and you know, it was quite tough. And obviously he didn't finish the whole process off, but that must have been pretty hard for him. And I'll guarantee that Andrew probably wasn't feeling quite as comfortable as he might have looked either. So it's just good to you know, for all of you to know, even coming from the expert, I'm sure that was difficult. You know, he makes it look so easy. I know, which is great, and which is why we all look up to him, and why we admire the way he does things. But you know, I'll guarantee, just like the rest of us, inside he's probably a little bit like the swan doing this sometimes, and he'll admit that to you. You know, so it's good to see that. And anything else anybody else wants to say? Anything that, you know, they particularly got from last night? No. Okay.
Oh, does that mean you don't want to have him back again?
Yeah.
Oh, you do want to have him back again? Oh,
He'll
The
definitely
other
coming back.
question that was really helpful was Leanne's all the tips about starting up in practice and getting clients
You'll
was
be
very
getting a lot more of that later. You'll get a lot more as I know some people are already starting to do that, but as we get towards the end of the course, we do cover some of those things, but I'm sure that Andrew will come back in and be happy to do some of that. We can certainly ask him to, can't we, Heather?
yeah, he's the marketing guru.
Yeah.
Didn't he do a webinar on that?
Yeah, there's quite a few on how to market. There's one on about Facebook marketing and Google marketing, because you have to do it totally different because they're looking for different things.
Yeah, because there's a fairly recent one on it. I'm sure there was.
Yeah, there's a fairly recent one by some
James Taylor.
an ex-student came in and did stuff.
Yeah, James shared quite, because James, I think he qualified, well, that was probably 6 years ago, isn't it, James? I think he works in Harley Street as well.
Yeah.
But he shared quite a lot of interesting things, and that's a webinar that's worth watching. And James has actually got a group on Facebook that's worth joining, actually, because he shares a lot of very interesting stuff. And you'll see probably he posts a lot of stuff in the big group, sometimes very long answers, but he's very, very experienced. You know, obviously knows what he's talking about in terms of the marketing as well, and he's able to charge very well as well. So it's definitely worth watching that. But I'd say probably, I mean, you can watch it anytime you want, but I think as you start to pull everything together near the end of the course and you're actually getting ready to go out there, that's probably the good time to watch these things, because they actually start to become really relevant. Yeah, so there's all those resources there for you. Okay, well, everybody's happy. If everybody has got nothing else to say, we're going to move on and look at grief for the first part of today, how to deal with grief, and a sort of a technique that Andrew's developed as part of that. And then after that, we're going to look at Andrewisms. And you're going to look at Andrewisms, should I say. Okay, so if I can just share my screen with you briefly. Okay. These ribbons in the way. Move. There you go. Right. Okay. Right. Okay, so can't believe we're in week 22. Not so long to go now. It will be that long before we're saying goodbye to you all. But, it seems to have gone so quickly, doesn't it? It really does. So week 22, and we're going to finish off this module today, moving on to module 10 next week. So today we're just going to look at handling grief. We're going to talk about the magical glade, which is a technique that Andrew's come up with, which you can sort of differ with, and certainly I'll talk you through what you do, but you know, there's different ways of doing that depending on your client and what they're interested in and so on. And then in the second part, as this is normally a practice session, we're going to divide you into groups and you're going to go through your list of Andrewisms, and we're going to talk about discussing that as well. Okay, so just a little bit about grief first of all. Sometimes you might find a client doesn't come to you particularly about wanting to get over grief, but sometimes you find out that's actually what it is. You know, sometimes somebody will come because they really just can't get over something, and that is their prime reason. But I've had quite a few people that have come. For example, I had somebody come with anxiety and insomnia, but actually it all came down to grief. He didn't even know that himself, and that just came out spontaneously in the session. And I think he had the biggest ab reaction I think I've ever seen. You know, I think he was shaking for 20 minutes and he kind of completely relived the death of his mother all over again. But that wasn't why he came to see me, as far as he was aware. But sometimes you will have people come to see you specifically about the fact that they can't get over something. that can be anything. I think like anything, it's all about perception, isn't it? So somebody losing their long-term pet could mean as much to them almost as losing a mother. You know, it's what it is to that person. So grief can be about death of family, friends, somebody that was very special in some way. It can be a relationship, you know, a relationship breakdown, which somebody just cannot get over for one reason or another. And that can take on exactly the same sort of attributes and all the different stages of grief, which I'll talk you through in a moment. And sometimes it can be a lifestyle. It could be something that maybe somebody's been all their life, something they've done, and for one reason or another, they may have had to give that up. You know, perhaps somebody's had an illness or something like that, and what they used to be, they're now not. It could be, you know, even in terms of grief of age. There's so many things it could be, you know, that that grief can come down to. So everything's different. And as I said, some people will come specifically because they can't get over something. Sometimes that will just come out as part of the session or sessions, that actually that's what's at the bottom of things, or one of the things that's at the bottom of things when you're peeling down those onion layers. So 5 stages of grief. This is as laid out by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. So you will find that there's other sort of models that might say there's 7 stages of grief, or, you know, there's lots of different versions, but looking at the 5 stages of grief, we'll focus on that. You've got that sort of initial shock, disbelief, denial quite often. So, you know, if we're talking about somebody that's lost somebody that's really, really important to them, perhaps the loss of a partner or something like that, that there is almost that cannot accept. They cannot accept that that person's actually gone. There's a stage of anger, which is quite often directed at the person that's left them, or it could be directed at the people around them, even themselves. Again, that comes out in lots of different ways. There's a bargaining and guilt, which I'll talk you through in a moment. Sometimes then goes to depression, and eventually you hope it comes to acceptance. Now, it doesn't always happen in this order. Sometimes somebody might skip from one to another, and sometimes you might find that somebody gets stuck in one of those for a very long period of time. So quite often that shock, disbelief, denial can be somewhere that somebody stays stuck for a very, very long time. I think we see it in films quite a lot. I don't know if any of you have seen Poldark. I think the husband of Elizabeth at some point gets stuck in this denial, shock, disbelief, and he's kind of going a little bit crazy with it. So, you know, we do see this sort of thing sort of played out in dramas and films and so on. But that is quite common. If somebody is still stuck in one of these stages, that's likely to be when they're coming to see you, or see you about something else when this actually comes out. Okay, so just working through those stages. So as I said, with the shock denial, really that person doesn't want to acknowledge that it's happened. So they are, you know, it's just like this can't be. A little bit like, you know, I can remember being a child and losing a relative. You can't quite comprehend it. So you kind of think that it's not really happened. There must be a mistake. You know, I can remember losing a grandparent, and I probably wasn't in shock as much as that. I just thought it was a big mistake. And I remember being told that something was going to happen on the Friday, and I thought they're going to tell me that they haven't died. You know, so I couldn't quite take that on board. So there is that element of, you know, that there must have been a mistake. This can't be real. When you get to that shock, denial, disbelief sort of stage. The anger, as I said, can come out in lots of different ways, and it can affect lots of different things as well. As I said, it can be, you do quite often hear people that are angry at that person for leaving them. You know, how can you do this to me? They're so angry at that person that's left them behind, whether that is a relationship or whether that's a death or whatever. But it can come out in other ways, anger of, you know, different things as well. The bargaining and guilt stage, again, a very negative stage, where there might be the regrets of perhaps about what could have been done, what could have been said, the fact maybe they didn't say goodbye, perhaps the last thing they did was actually, you know, had an argument with that person before they never saw them again or they died. So that can be very, very sort of disruptive and creates that cycle of guilt. And again, that guilt sometimes will leak into other things. So, you know, that stage again, very, very negative. Just looking for something to be different, looking for it to just not be as it was, and, you know, trying to bargain and with something that they have no chance of bargaining with, really. Sometimes people will then sink into the depths of depression as they actually start to acknowledge that there is no way back. You know, so if somebody's died, then they're not coming back. They're not going to see them again. You know, they really have gone. Again, it can happen in relationships or lifestyle, anything like this. It's that as the recognition of the fact that the loss has actually taken place and they now recognize that they're no longer in denial, that can just send them down a very slippery slope of depression. So again, you can quite often inherit people at that stage. In fact, somebody might come to you as depressed with various symptoms, but it actually might come down to the fact that they're actually grieving. So as I say, a lot of the times you find these things along the way, they're not necessarily specifically coming for that. What you're actually hoping to get to is that acceptance and hope. Now, sometimes people will find their own way there, obviously, but that's something we can help with, is to get them to that point where they can actually accept the fact that that's not going to be again, whether that's a relationship, whether it's, you know, whatever it is, that you can actually move forward. And, you know, that although things aren't going to be the same, that we can accept that now and we can move on. And there's still sadness, but it's a different sort of sadness. It's not, you've left that denial and disbelief behind. It's actually acceptance and hope for the future, not hope that that person or lifestyle will be there again, but it's just that you will have a life again, I guess. Because I think for some people, when they're going through that stage of grief, for whatever reason, it's almost like they're in this continuous loop or cycle and life stops for them. They can't move past that. So that hope and acceptance gives them that chance to break the cycle and move forward. So as I said, these stages don't necessarily happen in that order. They're not fixed. People don't necessarily go through every single stage either, but they're just very, very common reactions that people have following some form of loss. Okay, so treating grief in the way of, if somebody specifically comes to see you about something they're dealing with, a loss that they're dealing with of some sort, you would treat it like a normal session. Obviously, lots of questions again. You're wanting to know how soon, how long ago that was. And that might give you some indication as well as to what stage of the grief cycle they're in. You know, so if it is only 3 months, it's quite likely they're still going to be in that possibly denial stage. But, you know, really just the same sort of questioning as we use with everything else, lots of fluid and clean questioning, and really trying to find out what that loss really means to that client and how it's actually impacting on their life. How is it interfering with their life and stopping them moving forward? You know, if you've got somebody who just consistently wakes up in tears, goes to bed in tears, they're not being able to work, you know, it's obviously completely taking over their lives. So it's finding out exactly where they are, as we do with any symptom, and where they want to be. You know, what is it they really want to do now to be able to move forward? How do they want to feel? So it, again, like any session, very, very similar, going through the same sort of process. One of the big questions to ask in relation to the Magical Glade exercise, which I'm going to talk you through in a moment, is did they get a chance to say goodbye? Or say goodbye in the way that they really wanted to, which frequently we don't. I think you find that when people perhaps have lost somebody and they were there at their deathbed, it's easier perhaps to deal with sometimes for those people because they can accept it, they've seen it, it's happened, and perhaps they do then get that chance to say the things that they needed to say. But quite often these things don't happen like that. So that is quite an important question to find out, did they actually get the chance to say goodbye in the way that they wanted to? Did they get the chance to say the things that they really wanted to say to that person that they lost? So, you know, let's think about this perhaps in more in relation to death, the Magical Glade, I guess, but you could relate it to other things as well. So Andrew has developed this exercise called the Magical Glade. Now, I will say I'm going to talk you through it as it is, but it doesn't have to be the Magical Glade. I know that I've personally haven't used it as just this. I've sometimes used it where people have told me where was that special place with that person. So that's where they meet them. So it might be that you find out from your client where would be the place that, you know, if you lost your granddad, for example, that you were very close to, where would you visualize him being now? Or where would you visualize that you would be together? So it might be that you might use that sort of place rather than just a general magical glade. But the magical glade can be very, very effective because it's a nice sort of place to meet. A bit like when you take somebody on an induction to a sort of to a lovely woodland or a lovely beach or something like that. It can be really nice. But if you can personalize it and take them somewhere which is very personal to them and the person that they're grieving, then that might be even more sort of impactful, really. Okay, so this is the sort of introduction script here to the Magical Glade. So I'm just going to read you through this little bit here. This is just as I said, you can adapt this yourself according to how you were working with your client and what their particular thing is. But you might say, imagine that you're walking through a beautiful wood on a lovely sunny day. There's sunlight flittering through the trees and a gentle breeze just rustles in the leaves. You notice some woodland creatures scampering here and there, and you feel the crunch of the leaves and the twigs beneath your feet. Up ahead, you notice what seems to be a clearing in the woods, but when you step into it, it has a magical and enchanted feel to it. And if anything could happen here, it just feels like it could. And as you step further in, you feel safe, but in the anticipation of something. And then from the other side of the glade, you see the name of the person that would be deceased walking towards you. They look well, they look happy, and as you move closer to each other, you realise that this is an opportunity for you to say all the things that you never had a chance to say. So you can see that's a kind of a general nice place that you could meet that person, but you can see how you could adapt that depending on what, you know, having had that conversation with that person about what was an important place for them. And I know that certainly I've worked with a client recently where they actually created a place in their mind where they could visualize that their granddad was, because they were very close, and that's where they met, and that's where she had her conversation with him. So you can very much personalize it to what feels right for you. But this is a nice general sort of template for what you might like to use to take them to that place. Okay, so when you get them to that place, obviously you do a normal induction to get them there. And that would be your kind of introduction into where they are. The aim is to have the client actually have that conversation with that person that's no longer here. And for them to be able to basically express the unexpressed. So it might be good, it might be bad, you know, it might be something that where they had a very, very bad relationship with somebody and actually they're still carrying that around with them. But you're encouraging them to have that conversation. So in this case, we've got here, you know, you made me feel really special and loved, you made me, you know, but the idea is that you don't say she made me or he made me feel like that. Just like with the past present tense, you're encouraging the client to be talking to that person as if they're there, okay? And just pick up on the bits of the conversation that you've had with your client about what they maybe wanted to say and what was important to them to actually deliver into this conversation. So if they're not automatically coming out with it and it's not spontaneous, just to pick up on those important phrases that they've come out with within that conversation. And just keep prompting them through it, keep encouraging them to go through that process. And as always, check in with how they're feeling, okay? And try to make sure that they're not sort of holding back and let them say everything that they feel they need to say, okay? So that's the first part of that conversation, is to have the client talk directly to that person, good or bad. So as I said, it could be that they're angry, but actually more often than not, it tends to be they just want to say all those lovely things that they felt they never had a chance to say. So that's their part of the conversation. Okay. Now, as we move on, so they say all of these lovely things, and then it switches around. Okay. So the idea is that you get the client to almost switch places in their mind as if that person is then talking back to them. So you know how sometimes when we do expressive the unexpressed, I know sometimes that clients will sort of say, well, they don't care, or they feel really ashamed, or they're saying this. You're encouraging them to get that deceased person, or that person who's no longer there for whatever reason, to talk back to the client. Okay, so you now address your client as if they are the person that's no longer there. Okay, and you're encouraging them to say everything back that that client needs to hear. Okay, and this is where quite often it will become quite emotional, and your client may well have an abreaction. Okay, so the phrases that you might use, I mean, Andrew suggested phrases like "I'll always be here for you," "I'll always be supporting you," and so on. But again, you'll make it more specific, because you will have statements perhaps from your client that might be exactly what that client really needs to hear, because they might have said that I never felt loved, or whatever it is that they need. You need to be very sort of on what that client needs to hear, so that you can sort of help them and guide them through that conversation. Okay, and again, just keep that going as long as you can, so that as long as it feels appropriate to, anyway, just keep that conversation going as long as you can. Okay, so the third part of that conversation is to get them to switch back to being them. So you're then talking to them again, and what you're looking for again is to how different do they feel. Okay, so you're really checking in with them, check in with their body, check in with their emotions, finding out how they feel. And quite often they may well be very upset by now, in a nice way, very emotional, but they may say they feel lighter, and you encourage them to say it out loud and to really just feel those emotions. Okay, and when you feel ready, you might sort of ask them if it's time for them to say goodbye. Okay, so make sure that they're ready to leave that situation, because you'll quite often find it's a bit like when you take your client to a happy place. Sometimes they really don't want to go. They like it there. So, let them really feel into that situation, let them really enjoy that feeling. And then, again, Andrew suggests things like, encourage them to say, thank you for being my, whoever I am to you, mother, father, daughter, whatever. And then kind of reassure them as well that they can come back to this place whenever they want to, because what your client's doing, in a sense, is almost like they're creating an image for themselves of where that person is and where they can go to them in their mind whenever they want to. And they can, in a sense, relive that conversation and maybe even extend on that in their own mind. And certainly with this particular client of mine, she created a new place where she now sees her granddad. That's how she visualizes him, in that place where they used to do things together. So whenever she wants to think about him, that's where she goes. It's like her special place for him. So it can really create quite a lot of peace for people to do that. So as I said, you can use the magical glade and you keep it very general, and that's fine. And that works very, very well. If you do specifically find that your client has got somewhere that they would particularly like to meet them, then that's really good. And as always, the more sort of personal it is, the more powerful it is. Okay, so when the person that's no longer there is gone, then you just get the client to walk out of the woods and do all the same things that you would do in a normal session, reinforcing all of those nice things as they come back, as they sort of come back into the room, bringing all of those lovely, positive feelings back with them, into sort of the conscious mind, if you like. Okay, so you can sort of use this at any stage of grief. You will get different results. Obviously, if somebody's near the end of accepting it, you're more likely to get that lovely acceptance and happy, you know, feeling, if you like, of remembering them in a really nice way. And sometimes it's just a lovely, lovely thing, you know, and it just works really, really well. Sometimes there can be a bit of a muddle of feelings because there's conflict around their feelings about that person, because they still have anger towards them perhaps, or, you know, so there may be things, and it might be even that they, you know, rather than have that lovely session about how nice it was, they might really want to express their anger at why did you leave me? Whatever it is that they need to express, it's an opportunity for them to do that. And it might be that that session isn't just as straightforward as you go from client to the deceased and back, or the person that's gone, should I say. It might be that you go backwards and forwards because that conversation goes on where they work through stuff together. And it's that opportunity to do that. So be prepared that, as with all the sessions, it might not go exactly to plan. You know, it can take on many, many different scenarios. So it really depends how, you know, what the situation is, what the stage of their grief is, what it is they need to do. You know, if it really is just to say goodbye, it might be quite simple, but it might be that they've got a lot more to say to that person. So, you know, be prepared for that. Sometimes Andrew's suggested that instead of visualizing that person, you might want to visualize like an essence of that person, almost like a sort of a personality essence, he describes it as, like a ball of light. Again, it's whatever you feel. I think as you're going with this and you're going with your client, use your imagination really, and just let it flow. So it's really about taking the idea of the magical glade and making it work for you and your client and whatever their particular sort of scenario is. And just being aware with all sessions, like all sessions really, that sometimes it'll just go with the flow and it'll be perfect, and you'll just have this lovely sort of happy person who's just made their peace with that person, they've said goodbye and it's all lovely. But equally they might have a bit of an argument there as well. So it, you know, you just, it depends where they are and what their situation is. So quite a useful technique. And as I said, think of it as a template. You don't have to use it exactly as is. You can just go with what feels right for your client. Okay, so any questions around grief before we move on to Andrewisms?
Yes, Debbie, sometimes it might be that the person or the thing that's lost is not actually dead.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So
That's okay.
Hated.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. I mean, give me an example of the sort of thing that you might mean. I mean, you're right.
If you'd had to give away a pet, or if you'd had to give away a child, or if it were things that had been lost, you know, like things with really deep sentimental value.
Yeah. Actually, think that things is an interesting one. I mean, I can understand if you know, say you've had to, maybe it could be a loss of a relationship with somebody as well, couldn't it? Where you've perhaps somebody that doesn't speak to you anymore, or something like that. I think what you've got to remember about all of this is about perception, isn't it? So whether that person is deceased or whether they're still alive, it's all about how you feel about it. So if you can go through that process and make yourself feel some sort of peace with that situation, it doesn't matter what it is, really. The material possession is an interesting one as to how that could be dealt with. Not one I've come across, actually. Is that in relation to a thing that you've lost, or?
Yeah, all your photos.
Right. Okay. So there's a sadness around that because you feel like you've lost memories.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting one to try and think how you would approach that one. I mean, again, it's about loss, isn't it? But you wouldn't. Your photos aren't necessarily going to meet you in the magical glade, although the memories could, if you see what I mean. So I think as you talk further with your client, you might be able to dig into that a little bit more to find out what it is they're really missing about that.
Yes.
And you might be able to recapture that in some way. But you know, really good point, Siri, because it isn't always a death. It quite often is other things as well. So yeah, really good one. Thank you. Okay, anybody else got any other questions around grief? No? Yes.
I did, well, my mum died, but the relationship I had with my mum was not a nice, friendly, let's go to the glade and everything's going to be perfect.
Absolutely.
But what I did need to do was to just get her out of my head.
Yeah.
So she didn't swim. So my mind created a swimming pool with my mother in the middle of it in a ring. And the ring got bigger and bigger. And after a while, she just disappeared down, sort of like drowned and went away. And I couldn't actually do this all by myself. So I had 3 superheroes also with me. So if someone feels scared, you can also create superheroes. I had Patrick Stewart as Jean-Luc Picard. I had Mark Harmon as Leroy Jethro Gibbs from NCIS, and I had Jurgen Klopp, the football manager. And they were my cheering people because it was too hard for me to actually even face my mum. Even though I've made her real vulnerable, she still had that power, and I had to let go of that power that she was holding over me. And that's kind of how we did it. So as she sort of drowned, the three guys with me, my superheroes, want to jump in, and I go, just let it go, for goodness sake, just let it go. And that was how I kind of cleared my mum out of my head. So that was a variation on it. So it doesn't even have to be a nice, happy or a reconciliation or something like that. Sometimes you can just use it, or a variation of it, as just a way to just let go of someone that you just don't want running around in your head anymore.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because as I say, invariably not everybody's just going to have a nice little happy time in the glade, because there will be issues around that person, and sometimes that the relationship you might have had with that person that wasn't good leaves you with guilt, and so you know that's part of what you need to let go of as well. You know, so these sort of sessions can turn into all sorts, you know, so you could have an element of parts comes into this when it comes to it, and you know, all sorts of bits could be turning up in a session like this. So and I think it's great that Heather mentioned that. We'll cover this more when we come to children, because we quite often suggest with children that they have a superhero with them to help them face their fears, but sometimes we need them as well. So particularly if we were a child when something happened. So thank you for sharing that, Heather.
And particularly when they're such good looking.
When they're what? Yes, of course. I think I'd have Gerard Butler as one of mine. Quite like him. Claire, were you going to say something? Oh, can't hear you, Claire.
I just wondered, when Heather was saying that, I was just wondering, would it work when somebody's ended a relationship with a narcissist?
Oh yes,
I can relate.
It's a way of getting somebody out of your head.
Yeah. So anything you want to get rid of, you know, some sort of something you would like to lose. Yes, you could. It could be adapted in all sorts of ways. So
the idea for me was just to make this person so less powerful, because sometimes when you've got had somebody in your life who has been overbearing and has dominated you, you've got to make that power just diminish. And my putting my mother in a swimming pool, knowing she can't swim, and the ring getting bigger and bigger, and she's clinging to the edges, she just came down to a size where I could manage. And then she just disappeared, as though, well, I don't know why I bothered paying all this attention to you, and I don't know why you took up so much headspace, but you can go now because I just don't need you. So that's how it worked for me.
And you'll be amazed as well, given these sort of situations, like that situation with Heather, that how creative your client's mind will be in relation to solving those problems. So, you know, I'm not saying that everybody will be, they're not all going to be like that. You know, some will be more difficult, but you'll be surprised how once they're in that relaxed state, those solutions come up. You know, I'm sure that was very random for you, wasn't it, Heather?
Yes, I'm not normally that creative, so I was quite amazed. I even knew the swimming pool where we were at, and I'm going, oh, flipping, we're doing back here. Why are we in a swimming pool? And then I was like, oh, that makes it easy to deal with. Yes.
So yeah, so that's a really, really good scenario. And I think, as I said, with this whole magical glade, that's just one part. Again, it's like another idea that you can use, but you'll find that possibly all sorts of the other techniques might creep into that, depending on where it's going. And it's about you picking those up as you go, which will just come with experience and being led by the client. You know, I mean, that would have been done with Andrew, I presume, Heather, but you know, Andrew won't have come up with those ideas.
No, he just went with it.
Exactly. So you don't have to create these magical scenarios, really. You just need to be led by what is in their head. You're just helping them to get it out. You know, as always, we don't have to solve the problem. We just help them to solve the problem. And you know, that's the answer, really. So any other questions or anything anybody else would like to share in relation to grief? No? Okay. Are we ready to move on to Andrewisms then? Now this is going to be so much more familiar to you than you realise when you actually start looking through that list. Have you all got your Andrewisms list with you, so that you can discuss that? Now what we're going to do is break you into groups as usual, and just get you to have a look at these Andrewisms, sort of work through them. And I just want the first sort of exercise is to actually go through them and see if you can identify in your groups how many of those you could hear Andrew using last night. And bearing in mind, he wasn't really doing a session as such. He was just talking to us. And I know he was kind of semi-doing a session there with Rachel, but just looking for as many of those Andrewisms that you can see. And sort of discuss them as a group. As well as that, and I think you'll find this just as you're working out what Andrew did, you'll start to notice how much you're already using a lot of these things as part of your normal practice sessions now. So to be looking out for that. And again, you're really having a general discussion about this, because a lot of these Andrewisms, it's another way of bringing together a lot of what you've already learned, and just reminding you again how much you already know. You know, you are actually becoming very experienced. You're so much more experienced than a lot of people that have gone out there and qualified already. Siri, did you want to say something? Sorry.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Last night, Andrew said to us, he said, when he was talking about dealing with people of different learning strategies, you know, people who are kinesthetic or aural or whatever. And he said to us, you know, later on down the line, you'll be picking up on this and you'll be changing the scripts to do this. And I thought, loads of the people, you know, in our group who I've observed, they're already doing it. And in groups that I've been in, we've been doing it together. So I think that, you know, you and Heather have brought us further than Andrew realizes.
Oh, that's nice to know. Thank you, Siri. That's. I mean, it's lovely for us to see. You know, I mean, because you are, you know, you're going it alone. You know, you are using what you're getting, and you're putting yourself into it, and you're using those techniques without even thinking about it. So thank you for that. That's nice to know that you feel that way. Okay. And anybody else want to? Anybody got anything else they wanted to say in relation to the Andrewisms before we move into groups? I mean, you're probably going to say it all in a minute. Something else I want you to look at as well is just looking at as well, perhaps maybe taking notes as you're talking about how you feel you could use some of these based on what you've done so far. You know, you might be able to look back at some of the sessions you've done and just looking at those Andrewisms now and just think maybe how you have already used them for a start, but how you might have been able to use some of those things to elicit different responses and to move things on. So really, it's kind of a general discussion in your groups, really looking at those Andrewisms, really kind of reinforcing what you already know. But the first thing really is to sort of look at how much you could see Andrew doing that and just kind of reflect back on that. Now, before we do that, Heather, is there anything you want to add to that? Anything else that you think that would be useful for everybody to look for?
Yeah, I was just thinking, okay, which ones of the Andrewisms do you feel drawn to? And which ones are you already using that? Yeah. Because I'm drawn to some more than others.
Yes. Yes, actually, it's funny. One of the ones he uses that comes up quite a lot, and I hear him use it quite a lot, that I don't very often, is, and if you did know, when somebody says they don't know, it's, but if you did know. And it's not one I've used a lot, but it's an interesting, when you do use it, how it just works. But there's ones like the is there anything you've never told anybody? So some of these things that it's not always appropriate, you'll know when it is, and that's that's what it is. You'll find that a lot of them, it's like with all of these things, you're not supposed to use all of these things in one session. They're just your little sort of toolbox of things that you can refer to. But yeah, look at the ones that perhaps you identify with, and maybe the ones that you don't as well. So it's really just a general look at that in your groups. Okay, anything else, Heather, that you think would be useful?
No, just see where it goes.
Okay, righty-ho. Right.
That's very Andrew.
See where it goes. That's the story of our life. See where it goes.
See where it goes.
Okay, so we'll break out. I'll just get rid of this. Hang on a minute. Come on. Can't get rid of my screen. Why is it not going? There we go. I'm trying to stop sharing. I don't want to share you anymore. Where's it gone? Can you do it without me doing this for some reason?
What, you mean like that?
Yeah, thank you.
I've got the power.
I know. Shouldn't give you the power, should we? Dangerous.
Yeah. Trust me, I'm a doctor. I have no idea where that saying comes from, but people often use
I
it.
know a doctor I don't trust, that's for sure.
Okay, are we ready to split up then?
Yep. Ready to go? See you all in a while.
Yeah, there's 4 rooms. One room's got a 4 in. It was either that or 5 rooms, and 2 rooms had 2. And I thought, nah, for conversation, just put a 4 together. So there's a 4 and 3 3s.
Is there any reason why you're still a cat?
Yeah, because I haven't put my video back on.
That's it. Okay, that's better. I was going to ask you before we move into the rooms. I guess what we do is we just listen in and just interact and interject as necessary.
Yeah.
Next week we're doing past life regression.
I'll record this bit. I've knocked out all the other bits, but
okay. Why are you recording this bit?
well, because it's feedback. It's part of it. It's rounding up the session.
Rounding up the session. Okay. So, did you all have some interesting discussions about looking at the Andrewisms, recognizing them last night? Some of you had some really good lists that you were working through, looking and picking out on that. Anything in particular that came up for any of you after talking about that? You've done all your talking, haven't you? You're all done, aren't you?
It's just what he said is what does she need to hear, what does need to happen a lot. So that's what I've picked up.
Yeah.
The little one, the little you.
There was a lot of repetition, actually, a lot of the same things. And Andrew will say to you himself, I'm actually a bit boring. I'll just keep saying the same things. And you do have to be. You do have to keep going.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you could hear that in what he was doing.
Mm.
Anything else that particularly came up in the discussion? Oh, who's that? Somebody's speaking and I can't hear them. No?
We were saying how he said, how does that feel quite a lot? And then Heather mentioned that that's because Rachel.
Stay with the feeling. He told me that several times.
Yeah, because Rachel's more of a touchy-feely,
yeah,
kinesthetic.
Yeah,
So
stay with the feeling.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I mean
I thought
that's
that was quite interesting.
yeah, that's something you get to know, and we are covering that on a couple of modules on where we'll look at that. But that is something to pick up on with people, because it really can guide where you go and how you go about it, and make it more effective for them. Because if you keep talking about what you're visualizing, and they're not visualizing anything because they don't, you know. So yeah, so it's good to have that, and obviously Andrew picked up on that. Anything else? Anything else that particularly came to light?
Rachel, I think I'm okay to saying this, but I think Andrew picked up that you are a very logical person who solves things logical wise, didn't you?
Mhm.
In a way, because he said so many times, and if you would know, and you know, and what would you say, and on the logical part of the adult you, the solver in a way.
I think Rachel might have frozen actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
She has the time delay. What you can hear in the
Yes,
background is Rachel's time delay.
Oh,
Yeah.
right. I'm not actually hearing what she's saying.
Well, she's not saying anything because
Yeah.
what you're hearing is
definitely.
what we're saying, but a
Ah,
little bit delayed.
right. Okay.
Her connection wasn't particularly good last night, was it?
No.
No,
We're not going to be able to get an
Yeah.
answer, I don't think.
Oh yeah.
no. I think
Sorry
it's
about
Yeah.
that.
Definitely.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you for doing that tonight. I think some of you were having a bit of a discussion about the grief as well, and how perhaps you could relate to that, and certain things that perhaps you've been through yourself as well, and how you can adapt it to work to lots of different situations, which I mentioned, but I think you could see how that could work with other things as well. Yeah, thank you for doing that. Now next week
Is that better now?
oh, was that Rachel?
yeah.
Did you catch that, Heather? I didn't hear. Sorry, Rachel.
Said, is that a bit better now?
Is it better now?
A little bit,
No.
a little bit.
Not much.
Not much, no. If actually, Rachel, if there's something you really want to say, you can put it in the chat box. No, she's smiling. Sorry, Rachel.
The micro is muted.
Pardon?
Her
Oh,
micro is muted.
Yeah. See if we can make that. Does that
U-
make it?
Usually if everyone mutes and then,
Oh.
because sometimes it's bandwidth.
Rachel, try now.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, we can. That's good.
There's such a delay.
What were you trying to say, Rachel?
I have no idea. I've completely forgotten now.
Never mind. Okay. Okay, so we'll let you all go home tonight now. But past life regression next week, and quantum physics as well. So moving into very different territory next week. So that's where we're going. And what are you doing in the practice on Monday, Heather?
We're sneaking into Inner Child.
Inner child. Okay, so anybody wants some extra sort of practice on inner child, Heather will be doing that on Monday.
Are
So,
you practicing grief?
I've only ever, yeah, it depends if you've got somebody who is in that scenario. I can't guarantee that all of you are sort of got loss issues. So when I learned it, it was something I learned as a technique, but I never actually practiced it or used. First time I used it was actually with a client.
yeah.
So I remember, and unfortunately, it was a student. I said, shall we try the glade? Hang on, I'll just get the bit of paper out. You know, it's in module 9.
Yeah.
And that was when I used it, was when I first did it for real.
Yeah, that is.
We're not having a demo.
We were going to do a demo. We didn't know if anybody wanted to do that.
Yes,
I mean,
nobody volunteered, so you can't force someone into when you deal with grief and when you deal with loss. It's very more personal than some of the other issues we come up with.
I don't mind doing it with my dad. If you'd like a demo.
okay, so you could do a demo next week then. You sure
Yeah.
about that, Claire?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we could do that on the Wednesday then.
Okay.
So it just means we'll just shift. We'll do the training session for past life regression. That makes sense, doesn't it, Heather? That's where we were going to go. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Oh, I
what,
don't want to do it if we're going to miss the past life demo.
Okay, we'll just move that
What
forward.
past life demo?
No, let's do that. You'll be
so
doing
what are we doing on Tuesday? Did you say? Sorry, I couldn't hear it.
Tuesday. We go into past life regression and a bit of quantum physics.
Ooh, Module 10.
Module 10. Okay. So we're doing
Module 10.
Which
Do
we
that on
haven't seen
Tuesday.
yet.
Pardon?
Which we haven't seen yet.
I will send it out at the weekend.
Okay.
Don't
that's
hassle
well.
me.
Okay.
I'm
and
going as fast as I can.
She's doing amazingly. So, and so Claire, you're happy to be a volunteer for the demo? Okay, right. So we'll do that on the Wednesday then. Okay, that's good. Right, and then what we'll do is we'll move the practice for past life regression to the following week. And that makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so well, certainly that's been practiced before, isn't it? No, and actually, as Rachel has said, there's one, if you want to watch some past life regression beforehand, I think there's a couple.
I think there's a couple of past life regression in there.
Yeah, so it might be a good idea to watch those before the session if you get time. It gives you plenty of time to have a look at those, perhaps over the weekend, if that's okay. I know it's a bit bitty that way, isn't it? Unless we do the demo on the Tuesday, if that makes more sense, because it follows straight on from brief.
Yeah, that'd make more sense, wouldn't it?
Yeah, should we do that instead? Are you okay with that, Claire?
Sorry, what?
Yeah, we'll do
Tuesday?
the demo on
Yes.
Tuesday instead, because otherwise it feels like we go to past life regression and then we dip back to grief. So
Yeah.
brief demo on the Tuesday, and then we'll move on to past life regression on the Wednesday. So we'll just have that more like a training session.
Yeah, well, it won't be really, really long anyway, will it? Just
No,
Mm.
so might start looking at quantum physics
Yeah, we'll see how.
after the demo.
Yeah,
Just see, just we'll turn up, we'll ask some questions and just see where it goes.
we'll go with the flow as you do. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody, tonight, and see you all next week. Have a lovely weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.